Hello, YouTubers, friends, compatriots, bootlicker, shills, deaths, search, peasants, vassals, minions, beat sacks. I'm a useful idiot, and let's go back to the USA and or global, and we're going to talk about tax havens again. Interesting timing, of course. We had the Panama Papers leak, and it's been all the rage over the last several weeks, all about tax havens and revealing a lot of individuals as well as corporations. But the fact that it involves a lot of individuals, of course, makes it a little more complex because individuals may or may not have some legitimate reasons for keeping their money in these havens. But now we have this report that comes out about the 50 largest U.S. transnational corporations and their tax havens from 2008 2014. And this subject keeps popping up every several years, and it's had a lot of high profile. And so this is not really anything new, and I'll actually research my old videos and post some of the other ones that I've done on this topic below, because I've covered this topic quite a bit. And basically the premise of this new report is that the top 10 U.S. corporations and the top 50 U.S. corporations all shelter lots of money overseas and skip out on taxes. According to this report, that costs $111 billion a year in taxes in the United States, and then an additional $100 billion of taxes they avoid in foreign countries, where a lot of these profits, overseas profits, might have been registered. And it's the usual crowd. We have Apple, which has $181 billion offshore. We have GE that has $119 billion offshore. We have Microsoft has $108 billion offshore. And then ExxonMobil, Pfizer, IBM, Cisco Systems, Merck, Johnson Johnson, of course, all the biggest, largest companies in the world with massive profits. And I've done videos before, like I say, about the fact that they end up not only not paying taxes, they actually get rebates from the government with all these credits. One of the ones that they bring up in this report too is Google. And I was just thinking how interesting it is that Google works so very closely with the United States government, including in military policy, as I brought up recently in a video about Google assisting Hillary Clinton and the U.S. government topple the Assad regime. So the whole letting these companies have these tax rebates and tax write-offs and tax shelters while they cooperate with the United States government, I'm sure is a big quotient with a lot of these companies. ExxonMobil, I'm sure, IBM, I'm sure, GE, I'm sure, and Apple, and everyone else. And so let's go through some of the facts here. Oh, before I get to the facts, I do want to point out that one of the things, of course, that is interesting about this is that there's this new climate out there in the world, apparently, about these tax havens, and it's become an issue as all these governments have been doing all these bailouts and are essentially all broke. And they're finally looking to get this money after all these years, even though everybody's known about these tax havens for a long time. Who could forget that little house in the Cayman Islands that's something like 20,000 square feet and is the office for something like 12,000 different corporations that are registered at that one house. And so the timing is really interesting, and they have upped the ante. And the United States, of course, has gone after Swiss bank secrecy and a lot of these overseas tax havens, but notably a lot of the British ones, including in the Cayman Islands and Bermuda, still remain open. And then the fact that money can ostensibly be offshore but parked in the United States as well through some wiggly work by the banks. So let's get into some of these figures that we have from this new Oxfam report. The top 50 U.S. companies made nearly $4 trillion in profits globally, but paid $412 billion in federal income tax, 10% rate, not the 35% tax rate as stated that our corporate tax rate is. And of course, all the corporations are constantly complaining about the 35% tax rate, even though they generally pay 10%, if anything. And I know I've done videos before that a lot of foreign companies operating in the United States use a lot of the same methodology, and of course they're able to avoid paying U.S. taxes as well. So it gets to the point where there really aren't that many corporations in the United States, large ones, foreign or domestic, who are paying anything close to the 35%. Um, so let's go back to these figures. Those 50 largest U.S. companies paid $2.6 billion in lobbying, and then received $11 trillion in government subsidies, which includes loans, bailouts, and loan guarantees. So a pretty good investment on their money. And as you can see from the other figures, $2.6 billion from those 50 large companies is chump change for them to spend, kind of like the fines that banks and corporations get for criminal activities. It's the cost of doing business. It's a drop in the bucket compared to what they make. Let's see, these total 50 companies also keep $1.4 trillion offshore, as per the list I read off earlier. U.S. multinationals reported 43% of their foreign earnings are from tax havens. So one example is in 2012 alone, U.S. firms reported $80 billion in profits coming out of Bermuda, which is 22 times, apparently 22 times the size of GDP in Bermuda. But there you have it. Through magic, $80 billion can be generated in Bermuda. Must be the tourist industry. I think the drinks down there are pretty high priced. That could explain a lot of it. And then lastly, of course, $100 billion in taxes in foreign countries avoided a year as well, like I mentioned earlier. And one of the things that startles me about hearing about things like this and this whole other dimension that exists. People talk about the first, second, and third dimensions and fourth dimensions. Well, there's a dimension that exists in the world, and that's the world that the rich live in. And so all this money is out parked in this never land of offshore accounts and all this wealth. And so for all intents and purposes, it doesn't exist. It's just out there in cyberland. But anyway, one last thing I wanted to add about this is I'll attach this video below as well, is apparently in part of these efforts of the United States to tackle this offshore tax haven culture that exists in the world is they're negotiating with a lot of these corporations I just talked about a one-time sweetheart deal, repatriating a certain amount of money. And they already did one deal like that already, but they're trying to line up another one. And once again, in the negotiating process, all these corporations that are paying 10% now and nothing close to 35% want a one-time repatriation fee that's either 0 or somewhere between 1 and 5%. So they're still trying to chisel it down and get yet another bailout. But anyway, that's going on. So surprising. I'm very surprised that one of the things that has been a result of the Panama Papers. I'm too much of a cynic to think that it would change anything, because it never changed anything before with all these leaks. But for some reason out there, now is the time, and everyone seems to be getting serious about this tax evasion, tax shelter. I guess governments around the globe are just so broke-ass now that they'll take money from anyone, including their masters. I'm a useful idiot. Don't you be one too.